Hello and welcome everyone to this live stream about Shorebird. So we will look at Shorebird, what it is, how it works. And for this we have today like a special guest with us. So it's like Felix Angelov. He is basically the creator of Shorebird. He has also created the blog State Management, which is really popular and many Flutter developers actually use it, and also Mason, which I really like. So I'm a fan of Mason also. And yeah, welcome to this live
Thanks for
stream.
having me. Super excited to be on. Thank
Yes.
you.
All right. And we also have Sajad. This is like another person from our team. He also joins today. And yeah, we wanted to like use the time to ask some questions, show you a bit about Shorebird, how it works, and also give you like a full demo so that you can see how you can integrate Shorebird into your apps so that you can push instantly updates to the users without going through Google Play Store and Apple App Store every time. So yeah, before we start, you can at any time write your questions in the comments. So if you have any questions about Shorebird mainly, then put them into the questions and we will answer them later. So just write it down and we will later look through the questions after we give a short demo of how Shorebird works, and then we will also answer your questions. So just write it down whenever you feel you have a question. Okay, so the first question is, what is Shorebird? Maybe Felix, you can like answer it in some short sentences. What is Shorebird? And
Yeah. So, in one sentence, Shorebird is the company that Eric Seidel, who probably most of you know, he was on Google managing the Flutter and Dart team for many years, and he left to basically do his own thing, which is Shorebird. And so I was excited about what he was working on in the mission, and decided to join him. So Shorebird currently, our number one product is Code Push for Flutter. But Shorebird is kind of just a company that's going to be trying to bridge the gaps between what enterprises and like large teams need out of Flutter. And sometimes that's stuff that the Flutter team at Google can do, but sometimes it doesn't really make sense for them to build solutions for certain things. And Code Push is one of those examples. So we want to kind of fill the gaps that exist in the Flutter ecosystem and kind of build some products to help make Flutter development more accessible and make, as Eric says, multi-platform the default for app development. So that's kind of a quick summary of Shorebird. So you probably, if you've heard of Shorebird, have heard of Code Push, which is our number one product at the moment.
yes. And yeah, so that's first of all about Shorebird. And I guess you can like quickly give us like a demo about how it works, how we can
Yeah.
maybe install it, and how the users can directly use it for their Flutter app to push their app updates directly to the different users. So that's
Yeah,
the
I would love to.
part. Okay. So when you are ready, I can like share your screen, I guess, right? So
Yep, I
okay.
am ready. Let me know if everyone can see.
Yes, yeah, we can see your screen.
Okay, awesome. So the easiest way to get started with Shorebird is just to head over to our website, which is shorebird.dev. And you can read more about Shorebird on here. I won't go through this yet. We'll probably cover most of this later on in the questions. But to get started, all you have to do is click on the sign in button in the top corner, and that will take you to the Shorebird console. And you just need to log in with a Google account. At the moment, we only support Google accounts, but if you need a different auth provider, definitely let us know, and we'll add others. We just figured Google was a good place to start since most Flutter developers have Google accounts already. And once you've signed in with your Google account, there are some instructions that you can follow for how to install. Mainly the tool that you interact with when you use Shorebird Code Push is the Shorebird command line tool, or CLI. So if you're on Mac OS, you can just copy this one command and run it to install Shorebird. And if you're on Windows, you can copy this command on PowerShell, and it will clone our Shorebird repo and install everything that you need to get started. And then the last thing that you need to do before you can actually start adding Shorebird to your project is just log in. And I've done those steps already. So I have here just a blank VS Code window, and if I type Shorebird in my command line, you can see that I have the command line tool installed, and there's a bunch of commands that I can run, which we'll talk about. And I've already logged in to my same Shorebird account that I have here in the console. So that's all the setup. And for the demo, I figured probably the easiest thing to do would be to just run Flutter create. And maybe I can do this on my desktop. Run Flutter create, and maybe we can create, I don't know, create a counter maybe. I'll create an empty project, and let's switch into that project. I'll open that in VS Code. And hopefully most people who are watching are familiar with just the default project that gets created when you run Flutter create. I ran it with the -e or the -empty flag, so it's even simpler than usual. It's just a hello world app. And basically, the interesting part of how you add Shorebird is very simple. You can just keep following the instructions here. So the first thing you would do is just run this command called shorebird init, and that will analyze your project, do some things like find out if you're using flavors or not, and it will ask you for a name for your project. So I'm just going to keep the default counter name. And then it will do a bunch of checks, make sure that your app is set up correctly for Shorebird to work. And the most important thing that it does is it creates this one file called the shorebird.yaml. So you don't have to add any dependencies to your pub spec. You don't have to change any of your Dart code. Like, I haven't touched any of that. All I've done is I've run one command, which is shorebird init. It creates the shorebird.yaml file, which has just a unique identifier that tells Shorebird how to find my app or how to identify my app. And it tells the Shorebird servers that my app exists. So if I refresh the console, I should see there I now have my Shorebird apps is just a list of one app called Counter. And then here you can see this little rocket symbol is representing releases, and this little puzzle symbol is representing patches, which we'll talk more about. But I have no releases and I have no patches. And so the next thing I can do is I can create a release. And you can think of a release, creating a release in Shorebird the same way as creating a release normally. When you're about to submit to the Play Store or the App Store, you would create a release. And maybe you would run like Flutter build IPA -- release or Flutter build app bundle -- release. And so with Shorebird, it's the same thing. It's just a slightly different command. So I will demo Android at the moment. So I can just do Shorebird release Android. And that will run Flutter build app bundle behind the scenes and generate the app bundle. But that app bundle will contain Shorebird's updater so that you can push updates after the fact. So this can take maybe a couple more seconds. And then I will kind of go through how you can actually push an update, which is hopefully the exciting part. But yeah, this keep in mind can take a bit, especially if you're doing this on a larger project with lots of dependencies and Firebase, etc. It will basically take as long as it takes for you to normally build your project. So it can take a little bit. Usually Android's pretty quick, so I'm not sure. It's definitely thinking. Okay, there we go. So before we say yes, you can verify the information here. So you see some information about what app you want to create a release for, what the release version is, which we have 0.1.0, build number 1. And then we're releasing for Android. That looks all correct. So I hit yes to continue. And then this will upload my app bundle to Shorebird servers. And the reason for uploading the app bundle to Shorebird servers is so that later when I upload patches, Shorebird can create diffs of those patches so that when you submit a patch, you're only submitting the things that have changed, and you're not making users re-download a full, pretty big app, like a couple megabytes. Instead, it's only a couple 100 kilobytes usually. So that's the reason for creating a release. And yeah, once this is done, there we go. You should see some instructions. So normally, as I mentioned, you would create a release right before you want to submit to the App Store. So if I go into my build folder, you can see here it tells me build app, outputs, bundle. I have my AAB file, which if you've submitted to the Play Store, you're probably familiar with. So I can literally go to the Play Store and upload this AAB file and create a release. For this demo, I'm not going to do that because that will take way too long for us to actually see, but that's normally what you would do. But there's a cool command for if you want to verify changes locally, which is called Shorebird preview. If I can type Shorebird preview. And Shorebird preview will ask you what app you want to preview, what release you want to preview, what platform you want to preview on. And I currently have an Android emulator running. So it will download the release that we just uploaded to Shorebird servers and then run it on my Android emulator. So we see our hello world, which is nothing exciting, right? Like it's just the scaffold with some text in the middle. And so just for the purposes of this demo, all I'm going to do is I'm going to set a background color on my scaffold. So maybe we'll do like colors dot, I don't know, yellow. And maybe we'll say like hello from Shorebird instead. And you can make any Dart changes with Shorebird. It doesn't have to just be like simple things like changing a background color and changing text. Shorebird supports any Dart code changes, so you can even change packages and like lots of complex things. It doesn't have to just be this simple. I'm just doing this for the demo. But some things that you cannot change at the moment are Shorebird does not support changing assets. So if you, for example, wanted to add a new font, or if you wanted to add a new like image that you bundle with your app, Shorebird does not support that at the moment. We will soon support that, but it's currently not supported. And then the other big one is native code changes. So if you want to change like a native plugin that uses Kotlin, Java, Swift, Objective-C, etc., Shorebird does not support that, and it probably will never support native code changes. So you will always have to create a new release and go through the App Store review process if you change native code. So definitely keep that in mind. But Shorebird will detect that stuff. So don't worry if you're not sure. When you try to create a patch, as I'm about to do, Shorebird will analyze your changes and then give you a warning if you've changed something that Shorebird doesn't support. So now that I'm happy with my changes and I want to push those changes, so again, this is a release build of this app that's running on my phone here, Counter. So you can imagine I downloaded this from the App Store or the Play Store, and I want to push an update. And for that, you would just run Shorebird patch, and I want to patch Android. And again, this is going to build the app that I have locally. And the difference is it's going to build the app, and then it's going to pull down the release that is associated with this app, and then it will check what did I change. In this case, I only changed the background color and the text. So we don't need to ship in the over-the-air update. We don't need to ship a lot of stuff. We only need to ship the small changes. And so here, hopefully we'll see that the change is pretty small, like 75 kilobytes for ARM64, 62, etc. So pretty small, especially considering like the default app size is like 5 megabytes or something. It's definitely much smaller. And I think patch sizes, we'll make them even smaller over time. But anyway, this all looks good. I'm happy with these changes. So I will again hit yes. I would like to continue. And then now I'm just going to run ADB. Let me actually run ADB logcat to clean, and then let's pull up the emulator again. So by default, what Shorebird does is if you just set it up the normal way, which I can show you in the shorebird.yaml, there's this one line at the end that is auto update, which is enabled by default. And what that means is every single time someone runs an app or launches an app that has Shorebird in it, when the app launches, Shorebird will check, is there an update available? So if I kill my app, my counter app, and I relaunch the counter app, we can see some logs, and we can see that Shorebird is writing some logs that says, okay, I'm checking to see if there's a patch available. Patch 1 was successfully installed. I can maybe make this a little bit bigger. And so basically, the first time I relaunch the app, it will check to see if there's an update available and install it in the background. And then the app is the patch is available. So the next time I launch the app, it will boot from the patch. And so I will be running now the changes that I made over the air without having to resubmit my app to the App Store. Again, this is a release build of the app. I didn't rebuild the app. I didn't do anything. It's just installed on my phone, and I made changes to it directly. And so that's basically Shorebird code push in a nutshell. So you can think about it kind of like the way I describe it sometimes is like hot restart in production. So I can make changes, save those changes, run a command, and then people can restart their apps in production and then see those changes, which is super, super cool. And in the console, if I refresh, I can see things like, okay, my current latest release is version 0.10. My current active patch is patch number 1. I can see that I've only submitted a release for Android, which is okay. And then we have some basic information about patches, like how big they are, how many patches you have. And then we have some basic install analytics that we're working on adding even more, but we can see one person, aka me, just installed a patch for this version. And yeah, we're going to be improving the analytics and insights in the console drastically over time. But that's kind of like a quick overview of what the console helps you with. And you can also see in the account section of the console, based on what plan you're using with Shorebird, which we'll talk more about the plans later. But you can see your usage, like how many patch installs do you have remaining, what percentage have you used, how much money is it going to cost you, yada, 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 what apps are responsible for those patches, those types of things. So that's a super quick demo, and hopefully that was helpful. I'll stop sharing, and then we can go back to the questions.
Yes. I think there were some really interesting questions during the time that you had the demo, so we can look at some. So there's still like a confusion, or like some people want to clarify
Yes.
about plugins and
Plugins.
packages. So if they are using plugins, can they directly? They cannot, right? They cannot.
So I think, yeah, the important thing is when I say the word plugin, I mean like a Flutter plugin, which has a native
native code.
dependency. So you can think like Connectivity Plus or Bluetooth or I don't know, geolocator, etc. Like things that have native code are not supported by Shorebird, but packages are. So if you just have a pure package, like if you want to add provider to your app, or if you want to add block to your app, or add whatever to your app, as long as it's pure Dart code, Shorebird supports it. Even though it's in a package, that's okay. But plugins specifically, aka native code, is not supported. Or if you have native code that you're just writing in your app directly, like if you open your Android folder or your iOS folder and you write some native code, Shorebird cannot patch those over the air. You have to create a new release and submit to the App Store the way you normally would whenever you make those changes. And Shorebird will detect that and give you a warning that says, hey, I've detected that there's native code changes. Here are the native code changes I've detected. Are you sure you want to continue? And if you're absolutely positive that it's okay, you can choose to continue. But in most cases, you probably don't want to continue. You probably want to create a new release in those cases. So just for native code changes. When I say plugins, I mean like Flutter plugins. But packages are okay as long as they're pure Dart.
Yeah. So there are in general more packages. So yeah, you can use like a lot of packages in general and can update them directly with
And
Shorebird
usually if you're
plugins.
changing, usually if you're changing native code, that means you're probably making like a pretty big change to your app. And so in those cases, you probably want to resubmit to the App Store anyway. So yeah.
Yeah. The next question from the user I think is also interesting. Do you need to restart your app every time to get the update, or how does it work?
Is it okay if I share another quick demo?
Yes,
Do we have
yes,
time?
for sure. Yeah.
Sorry, I stopped sharing my screen. Let me share my screen one more time. I will, let me pull it up. So in our organization on GitHub, if you go to GitHub/ShorebirdTech, we have a lot of stuff. Most of the code is open source, by the way. But the interesting thing is, and I'm going to clone this to show you. Let me put it in the right spot. So if I so there's this example project which uses something called Shorebird code push the Dart package, and this is available on pub.dev. So if you go to pub.dev packages Shorebird code push, you can see that basically it's a package that helps you communicate with Shorebird's code push updater. So you can customize the update experience. It doesn't have to just be the default experience that I showed you. The reason I showed the default experience is because that's what you get when you don't change anything. Like I didn't have to change any Dart code. And when my user restarts the app, they will get update checks and they will launch from updates, etc. But you don't have to just use that default mechanism. You can use the Shorebird code push package. And so we have an example of that here that's open source, which you can check out later. It's if you go into Updater, Shorebird code push, and then example. That's the app that I'm going to quickly run and show you. And so just for time's sake, let me install the dependencies. Since I just downloaded this, you saw me clone the repo. And then I'm going to, again, run Shorebird init. But I'm going to run Shorebird init with the -- force flag because there's already a shorebird.yaml here. And I want to overwrite the shorebird.yaml. Oh, let's see. This is probably using an older version of Android. Let me just recreate the Android folder. Multiple output. What? Multiple output directories. Flutter. Create. Oh, platforms. I forgot -- Too early for me. But I'm just gonna blow away the Android directory and recreate Android really fast because I think this is a little outdated and we'll probably have to update. But anyway, I'm just going to run Shorebird init -- force. It's going to do the same thing as before, ask me how I want to name the project. I'm just going to name it with the default name, Shorebird code push example. And then again, it just creates the shorebird.yaml file, nothing special. I'm going to release Android again, just like we saw. And then the cool thing is I'll run the app and show you the types of things that you can build using the package Shorebird code push on pub.dev. You can completely customize the update flow, how often you check for updates. I even recently, when I spoke at the Flutter and Friends conference in Stockholm, I demoed how you can send, for example, a push notification to people's devices that says, hey, there's an update available. Do you want to install it? And it's really up to you how you build that experience. We give you the tools to do all of that. So let me quickly let this finish, and then I'll show you what this example app looks like. And I think you might find that more user-friendly or a better user experience. And again, this is all open source. So if I go too fast or if you want to check this out, you can run this exact same demo on your computer after the live stream. So yeah, once this is done uploading, we can preview the app. All right. So really quick, again, let me just refresh in my console. Now I should have two apps. I have the counter that we did first, and now the code push, Shorebird code push example. And I'm going to preview the second one, the Shorebird code push example on Android. And this app will look a little more exciting than the boring counter app or basic app. So this app is basically an app that shows me if I have a patch installed, and then gives me a little button that allows me to check for if there's an update available. So if I click this button, we can see there's no update available, there's no update available. And so now I can go in, and again, this is a pretty simple app, but I can go in and I can change, for example, I don't know, my seed color from red to blue. And maybe we also want to change the brightness to dark, just to make it more dramatic so you can see the difference. And that's it. Like I again, just make my changes, and then I run Shorebird patch Android. That will create the build, do the diff, upload the diff to Shorebird servers. And then I should be able to just click this button to see if there's an update available,
Does
and
this also
users
work
don't have to
without?
restart.
Does this also we
Does it
can
also work?
like listening to updates, for example, like it will show a dialogue or something? Would this also work?
Yeah, you can build that.
Okay,
We
yeah.
don't expose we don't expose like a subscription, like a stream that you can subscribe to or anything at the moment, but you can build that yourself.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
yeah, now that I've pushed the patch, we can see in the console that I have one patch available, and I can just in my emulator here click this button. Now I see in the top a little banner that says, "Hey, there's an update available. Do you want to download it?" I can click download. It was a really fast download because it's tiny, so you might not even have seen the loading indicator. And then it says a new patch is ready. Restart the app, and then bam, the app is restarted, and it's using the changes that I've made here, and it tells me that the current patch number or version that I'm running is 1. And all of this is from the code push Shorebird code push package. So it gives you APIs like give me the current patch number as a future. It gives me APIs like is there a new patch available for download? It gives me APIs like where is it? Download update, download update if available, etc. So you can check this out on pub.dev, and you can completely customize the update experience, and you can even uncomment this line and disable the automatic update checks if you would like, if you want to completely manage the update process programmatically with your own logic. And like I said, you can make it really sophisticated. Like you can imagine every time you push patch, you can send a push notification to your users, and then on your app, you can handle that notification and show them that there's a patch available. Use this package to prompt them and download the update and all that stuff. And like you can make it a really, really seamless kind of experience that doesn't involve them having to restart the app twice. And the app restarting twice thing, we will probably continue to improve on. Like the default update behavior will probably continue to improve. But at the moment, it's one restart, and then it will check for an update, and then a second launch will boot from the update. So it depends on your requirements, but you have the tools. I just wanted to show that you have the tools necessary to customize that experience. So hopefully that answers that question.
Yes. Okay, it's interesting. So basically, right now you could not directly change the app by just pushing it. So the user needs to click
Yeah, you still
right now.
you,
Yeah.
you still need to restart. I mean, you can go as far as automatically download the update for the user and show them like, hey, there's an update available. We've installed it, and then like a button to restart the app. But they
Mhm.
still just need to restart the app. I don't think that maybe there is, but I think it would have a lot of technical challenges of just like hot restarting the app. I think a full restart is necessary at the moment because of the engine and also the state that you probably have in your app at any point in time. Like it might corrupt some things if we try to get fancier. So
Okay.
at the moment, again, like one of the biggest things with Shorebird is we want to have it be really, really safe to add to your app. We don't want it to degrade your app. We don't want it to cause crashes in your app. We don't want it to be like a risky thing to add. So all of the way that it's built and the way that it works right now is mainly with safety in mind, so that you can rest assured that in the worst possible case, your user experience is the same as it was before Shorebird, and in the best case, your app is closer to like the web, where on the web, every single time you deploy a change, all of your users get that change right away, and it's not like mobile where you don't know when your users are going to get the updates or who's updated, etc. So the main reason for some of these, like the way some of these things are implemented at the moment, is for safety. But we can probably continue to make that auto update more kind of seamless, and maybe get it down to one relaunch instead of two relaunches. But again, like our number one priority right now is iOS, and I've demoed Android because Android is stable. iOS is still in alpha, and the biggest reason for that is because of performance. But that kind of relates to the App Store policy. So I guess we can answer some of this stuff while we go through the rest of the questions.
Yeah. Here are like some new questions, especially about iOS.
Yeah,
That
yeah.
might be also interesting. Um,
Uh-huh.
Here, one user says, I don't think you are allowed force restart on app on iOS.
Yeah. The plugin that I was using in the example that I just showed is on iOS. It doesn't actually restart your app. It just shows a notification that you can tap to relaunch the app. So there's a bunch of quirks. I mean, I think you can even I don't know how important it is to tell someone to restart the app, because like basically, I mean, I guess on iOS, some people leave the app in the background forever. So it is kind of important. But I think for the most part, like, it's really up to you how you handle this. At the moment, we do require one restart to actually boot from the patch if you're using the custom Shorebird code push package. So however, like, you can customize the user experience entirely and make it however makes the most sense for your app. But that's mainly a technical reason, because without a full app restart, like, the pieces that need to be initialized at the right times might not be initialized, and the state that you have in your app might be in a weird spot. So it's mainly for technical and safety reasons that you need to restart your app. And again, like, all this stuff might be will probably be improved dramatically over time. We're still pretty early on, and I forgot to mention, like, we're a pretty small team. Like, Shorebird is only 4 people at the moment, and we've only been doing this for a couple of months. So the product is still relatively new, and we're a relatively small team. So this will all continue to improve, especially once iOS is stable, because that's the number one priority. But again, since we work in the open, all of this is driven by customer and user feedback. So if you have any feedback about, like, feature requests, things that are deal breakers for you and your team, or things that you would love to see, just open an issue. And we mainly operate off of GitHub issues and feedback from the community. And one other thing is, you can also join the Discord. So if you go to shorebird.dev, we have links to our GitHub and Discord at the top. And we are active in Discord all the time. That's basically how we work, is just in Discord. So if you have any comments or feedback or questions, just let us know, and we will do our best to address them.
Yes. Okay, I guess we can come to the most typical questions. So Sajjad, we can like this question here, right?
Yes, exactly. After explaining everything in a very well manner and very detailed, I think everyone have the idea in their mind, like how Shorebird works and how is it going, and in the future it will definitely improve. But we should like go for the typical questions that everyone asks, and it goes everywhere. So the first question for you, Felix, about like the typical question is, Shorebird comply with the Play Store and App Store guidelines? How would you like to answer this question?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
would also like
So
to show
the short,
more questions like from other users. There's like this is the most typical question, because does it circumvent the App Store and Play Store reviewing process? And is this allowed from Apple side and from Google side? I think that's the most typical question that companies ask, or even Flutter developers that want to go and release the app with
Yep.
Shorebird.
Yep. Yeah, this is by far the most common question. And there's two major parts to being compliant with the App Store. One is there's technical compliance, which Shorebird technically complies with both the Play Store and App Store guidelines. So for example, on the Play Store, updates must be run in an interpreter or virtual machine. So Shorebird complies with that because it uses the Dart virtual machine. On Apple, similarly, you can interpret code and download code as long as it's all run in an interpreter. And we run your code in a Dart ARM interpreter, Dart simulator. And so technically, Shorebird complies with App Store guidelines. I've even, like I mentioned, for the Flutter and Friends talk that I gave in Stockholm, I actually built an app for that conference, submitted it to the Play Store and App Store with Shorebird in it, and I pushed updates to the app, and people could see it for themselves live. So technically, Shorebird is built to comply with the App Store policies. But as Sarah, for example, is getting at in her comment, does this circumvent App Store, Play Store review processes, etc.? That's the second part of being compliant with the App Store and Play Store, and that's making sure that the updates that you push are not deceptive. They don't violate like basic App Store policies, like, for example, based on the age that you've submitted your app for. Like, you can't, for example, take an app that you've submitted for like everyone and for children, etc., and then push an update and add like gambling to the app, for example, right? Like, that would be a no-no. You're clearly violating the App Store policy. But that's not because of Shorebird. That's because you've decided to change the way your app works or the core functionality of your app. and bypass the App Store review process. So Shorebird is just a tool, or Shorebird Code Push is just a tool. You can use that tool correctly or incorrectly. That's up to you. Just with like most tools, you can violate rules and like bypass rules, and that's on you. And like you can still run into trouble with the App Store if you choose to use Shorebird that way. And you will also probably get banned by us from Shorebird if we find out that you're abusing Shorebird, because that's not what it was meant for. But technically, Shorebird complies with all App Store policies, and that's part of the reason why iOS is still in alpha, is because in order to comply with App Store policies, we had to build an ARM interpreter. We had to figure out all of the infrastructure needed to technically satisfy those constraints, and as a result, we're still not there in terms of performance. And so there's a pretty significant performance hit on iOS right now when you add Shorebird, and that's the number one thing that we're working on improving. So it's safe to add and submit to the App Store, and you should have no problems. We also don't collect any information, and we don't require you to change the way that you submit your app to the App Store. Like, you don't have to check any new boxes because you've added Shorebird to your app. So we wanted it to be like as easy as possible and as transparent as possible. But please keep in mind, like, you shouldn't use Shorebird to abuse and skip the App Store and Play Store review process. You should more think of Shorebird as like a fallback if you have like a critical bug, for example, that is costing your company like millions of dollars and you need it immediately fixed in production. Shorebird is a perfect tool for that. Or if you have like a tiny tweak, you have like some, I don't know, like copy edits, or there's like instructions that are incorrect in your app, or something is like, I don't know, something is wrong for some small set of users and you need to quickly fix it. Shorebird is a great tool for that. But you shouldn't think like, oh, okay, great, I can submit any app to the App Store, get it approved, and then I can just rewrite my app and then use Shorebird. Then you're clearly violating the App Store policies, and then you'll have to pay the consequences of that. So definitely keep that in mind. And we have a full FAQ on this, by the way, which I can maybe share a link to later. I'll drop it in our internal chat, and then if you want to share it later. But basically, there's FAQs on Shorebird's website and on our doc site, and one of them is about App Store compliance, and it goes even more in depth. So actually, if you go to docs.shorebird.dev, there's even more, like specifically on the App Store guidelines. Yeah, actually, yeah, if you scroll up a little bit, you can see the App Store FAQ.
Here?
Down. Yeah, a little higher up in the page. Keep going. Yeah, you see more info. Does Shorebird comply with Play Store, App Store guidelines?
Okay, yes.
Yeah, and if you click on that more info, yeah, that should, yeah. So this is the full, like, excerpt taken from the Play Store guidelines and excerpt taken from the App Store guidelines about over-the-air updates and how Shorebird complies with those. So if you want to read more about that, definitely check out the FAQs. But the short answer is yes, Shorebird complies with both App Store and Play Store guidelines.
Okay, yeah, you have both like App Store here and for Play Store the answer, so you can read about it.
Yeah, and if you have more questions or concerns, again, just reach out on Discord or feel free to open an issue on GitHub if you have a specific case that you're worried about, or if something is not clear. All these docs are also open source, so if you want to make any contributions or if you find any typos or anything, again, we're always welcome to contributions. So
yes. So before we saw also like another question about, maybe I find it here, but I saw it also interesting. Can you integrate it with GitHub Actions? I mean, I saw it already on the website, but maybe you can talk a bit about this one here. How does it integrate with GitHub Actions? I think that's also like a
it's
CI/CD.
It's super. Yeah, it's super easy. Actually, we have a guide for that as well. If you go to, I can share my screen again really quick if you want to see. So if you go to docs.shorebird.dev and look at continuous integration on the left, we have two guides, one for integrating with GitHub Actions and workflows and one for integrating with CodeMagic. But if you use a different CI system or provider or tool like Bitrise or Circle CI or whatever, there's a million tools out there, Jenkins. Let us know, and we're happy to help work with you to add a guide for that as well. But basically, for GitHub, for example, we have a repo and a GitHub action called Setup Shorebird, which you can check out on the marketplace. And it basically is just like Setup Flutter or Setup Dart. You just add it as a step in your GitHub flow, and you can basically, it will install Shorebird for you and configure everything. There's one step that you need to run locally, which is instead of just running Shorebird login, you run Shorebird login :CI, and then that will generate a CI token, which you can add as a secret to your GitHub workflow or whatever you're using. And then Shorebird uses that secret as a way to authenticate, and you can then kind of just set up Shorebird and then run Shorebird commands. Like you can run Shorebird patch or run Shorebird release or do whatever you want. And you can have a workflow that is a manual workflow, or you can have a workflow that you trigger on a release or a tag or pull request or whatever. We really wanted to just give the tools necessary for you to just add Shorebird to your existing CI flow. So if you already use GitHub, for example, to deploy your app, deploy your Flutter app to like TestFlight or the Play Store, or if you use CodeMagic, we wanted it to just be like a drop-in replacement. So if you want to check out the CodeMagic guide as well, that was actually written by a community member. So that's why I said, like, if you use a different CI provider and you're interested in helping contribute to Shorebird, this is a great way to do that. We're more than happy to work with you to create a guide and whatever other pieces are needed to integrate with new CI providers. But these are the two that we have at the moment, and it should be pretty straightforward to add more in the future. So yeah, hopefully that helps. And again, this is all open source, so you can check out like the Setup Shorebird GitHub action. And yeah, it should be just like a one-liner, basically, that you add to your workflow, and then you have Shorebird available, and you can do whatever you want.
Yes. Then there's like also maybe a typical question, and do you support different platforms than iOS, Android?
So yeah, we're currently focusing on iOS and Android. We do plan to support all the platforms in the future. We have an open issue for desktop support, which I'm finding the link for in a second. Yeah, here, desktop support. I'll drop it in the chat as well. But it's basically just an open issue on our repo that you can upvote if you're interested in desktop support, and that's something that we'll likely add very soon after iOS is stable. But again, we're really focusing on making sure iOS is production ready first, and then we will go in and add the remaining platform support. So it will be coming soon. Just at the moment, Android and iOS are the main focus.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Okay, so I guess we can go on with some questions. So Sajad, we can probably go on.
Yes, of course. So another typical question that also a lot of people are wondering, like, how many apps can I configure for one Shorebird account? So how do you like to answer this question?
Yeah, I can again share my screen and talk through pricing maybe. So
Correct.
On shorebird.dev, if you head over to shorebird.dev and then you can click on pricing, we currently have 3 tiers. So for free, you can just sign up. You don't need to give any billing or credit card info or anything. You just click sign in and you have a free account, and you can publish unlimited, you can create unlimited apps. So I can have like thousands of apps on Shorebird. We don't care about apps. The thing that you're limited by on the free tier is the team size. So it's only one person can be on the free tier, and you're limited by how many patch installs you get for free every month. So with the free tier, you get 5,000 patch installs for free. And a patch install just means one patch was installed by one device. So for example, if you have a user or an app with a user base of 5,000 users and you push one patch, that will be 5,000 patch installs, right? Because you got 5,000 devices installed that one patch. So that's kind of what the hobby or free tier looks like. For the team tier, which is just $20 a month, you get unlimited developers as well. So you can add your team members and have as many people as you want. We don't charge per seat. We just charge per usage. So with the teams tier, you get 50,000 patches installs per month included. And then we charge you an additional amount per patch. So I believe it's $1 for 3,000 more patches. And then if you have like a really, really big app with millions and millions of users and you need custom pricing or volume discounts or private support, etc., we're more than happy to talk to you. Please just schedule a call with us and we can figure out like a plan that works well for you. But yeah, as you can see, like you can have unlimited apps across the board. So we don't care about how many apps. And the main thing that we limit you on is the number of patch installs per month, because I think that's what we think of as the value that Shorebird provides. So if you're not using Shorebird and you're not shipping lots and lots of patches, then we're probably not providing a lot of value. So then it's probably not something that you need to pay for. But if you are using Shorebird a lot and shipping lots and lots of patches, then it probably is providing value, and then it's worth paying for, is kind of our reasoning. But pricing is something that we don't intend to be a blocker. So if you're concerned about pricing, or if you want to talk about custom pricing solutions for really big apps, just talk to us. We don't want pricing to be a blocker for people to use Shorebird. We wanted it to be as available as possible. And we actually recently adjusted our pricing to give even more for each tier. Previously, free tier was only 1,000 patch installs, I believe. And then teams was like 20,000. So we increased all of those across the board and made the patch overage price cheaper. So we really want pricing to just be reasonable and fair, and are more than happy to talk to people who want more custom solutions or contracts or whatever it may be. Just talk to us if you have a really big app or are concerned about pricing. But yeah, unlimited apps across the board.
And if you're in the team and you have, let's say, 55 patch installs in the team plan, I mean, and you have 55,000 patch installs, are you just paying like some things on top, or do you directly?
Yeah, you just pay on top. Yeah, you just pay on top. So 55 would be like an additional whatever, like $2.
Yeah.
So yeah, you get the 50,000 patch installs per month for free. Like with the $20, you don't have to pay for the 50,000 patches, and you can view all this like I showed in the console. You can see your patch usage, and you can see it broken down by app, and you can see how much you owe depending on what plan you're on. And also something that we want to add in the near future is the ability to configure if you want to, for example, set a limit. So I don't want to spend more than, I don't know, $25 on Shorebird. That's something that we want to add in the near future, so that you can kind of configure that in the console. And then when you exceed whatever limit you've set, people will just stop receiving those patches, and you won't get charged more. So that's something that we'll probably add in the very near future. But at the moment, on the Teams plan, you just pay for the additional patch installs above the 50,000. And you can see it's like fractions, $0.0003 per patch.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
there are some more good questions, I guess. Let's look at it.
Yep.
So what about the performance of Shorebird? So here, like some performance questions. First of all, will the size be increased of the
yes.
Flutter app? And the second thing, is there like some performance like problems, let's say, or is there some longer loading time or any other things that might increase?
Yeah, so in terms of bundle size or app size, there is a slight increase. I believe it was a megabyte.
Yes.
And I think that's something that we're working on reducing. So I think Eric actually this week was able to cut it down by like 10% or 20%, and he thinks that we can cut it down even further. And that's mainly because of the Rust updater that we add when you add Shorebird to your app. So I think right now you can think of it as approximately 1 megabyte and maybe slightly less. And that number will hopefully continue to go down in terms of the impact to your app size. And then in terms of loading time, there should be no impact to loading time, because Shorebird runs all of the update checks on a separate thread in the background. That's why by default it requires 2 launches, because on the first launch we check for the update and install it on a separate thread in the background. And then the next time we will boot from the patch. So you're not blocking the user on like a splash screen or something. Everything happens asynchronously. And so there should be no impact to the loading time or startup time of your app. The main thing that, in terms of performance, like I mentioned before, the main impact is on iOS. If you add Shorebird to your iOS app today, since iOS is still in alpha, it will run significantly slower because all of your Dart code is going to run in an ARM interpreter, which means that all of your Dart code will run approximately 100 times slower than if it wasn't using Shorebird. And so that's why iOS is still in alpha, and that's the number one thing that we're working on fixing. And for some apps, you might not even notice that, even though it seems like a lot. If it's just a basic app with not many animations and not a lot of interactivity, you might not even notice. But for apps that are like really heavy in animations, for example, if anyone remembers like the Flutter clock challenge from many years ago that the Flutter team did, we ran the winner of that challenge's clock using Shorebird, and on iOS, instead of running at 60 frames per second, it runs at like 2 frames per second currently because everything is running in the interpreter. And so that's why iOS is, again, in alpha. We don't recommend you using it in production on iOS yet. But we're working very, very hard to try to make that happen next month, or this month, October sometime is our goal, to have at least a beta for iOS where we have improved the performance significantly. But that's really the main thing to worry about. Otherwise, in terms of like app size and startup time, there should really be very minimal impact from adding Shorebird. So
Yes.
Good question, though. Yep.
Yeah. I think we can like handle 1 or 2 more questions. I think here, this one might be also interesting. Is there an A/B testing support for pushing the updates only to specific users, or are you planning such a thing in the future?
Yeah, we will likely add something in the future that's built in, but you can already do that yourself, again, using the Shorebird code push package, because you're in control of who. So if you, for example, disable automatic updates, so by default, no one gets updates, and then you add the Shorebird code push package, then you can programmatically decide whether someone gets an update based on who they are in your app. So you can do A/B testing yourself using Shorebird. But again, in the future, we'll probably add something out of the box. Another one that's related to that is like partial rollouts or percentage-based rollouts. So maybe you only want to roll out the update to like 10% of your user base or 20% and slowly increase that number. That's not yet supported, but it's something that we have open issues for that we plan to add in the near future. So again, like we're very much driven by what people need and what customers are really asking for. So if any of this is super, super important to you, just let us know. File an issue if there isn't one, or if there is one, just give it an upvote. And that's really how we figure out what to do next, or how we prioritize what we work on next. So
yes. And yeah, do you have like any other things that you want to share about Shorebird that you think like are typical questions, or like other things that people ask? Is there any other things that come into your mind right now?
I'm looking through our FAQs to see if there's anything else. I think we covered most things. Let me see if there's anything. We covered the App Store. Self-hosting is another big one. A lot of people ask, can I use Shorebird on-prem? Like, can I self-host Shorebird? And we currently do not support self-hosting. That's something that we will probably, again, try to add after iOS is stable. But that's a big one that people ask about. Okay. So that's not yet supported. And then another one is Shorebird will work if from wherever you are, you have access to, since our infrastructure is running on Google Cloud, if you cannot access Google Cloud, then Shorebird will not work. So for example, I think currently in China, Shorebird does not work. And we have plans to make that work. But again, we're focusing on iOS. So those are some things to keep in mind at the moment. I'm trying to think if there's anything else. Shorebird does require an internet connection, obviously, to work. Also, if you try iOS, one of the other reasons why iOS is in alpha is because the patch sizes are really large, because we don't do any diffing. So on iOS, every time you push a patch, your users will download essentially a full release of the app over whatever they're on. So you should keep that in mind as another reason why you probably don't want to add iOS to your production app, because you will potentially cause people to use a lot of data downloading updates. But I think all of this is documented in our FAQs. One last thing that I think a lot of people ask about is like, what's the worst thing that could happen if you add Shorebird to your app? And I like to give the example of like the worst possible thing that can happen is you add Shorebird and then you make some, for example, native code changes, and then you ignore Shorebird's warning and you push the update anyway. The worst thing that could happen is you push a patch that crashes on your user's devices, and then Shorebird will detect that, hey, this patch is a bad patch because it causes a crash, and then it will roll back to the previous working version of the app, and then the next time users launch their app, it will boot from the previous healthy, either the original release or the previous healthy patch. So the worst thing that could happen is you cause your users a single crash in order for Shorebird to recognize that that was a bad release or a bad patch, and then it will roll back for you. So I think that's something that is good to keep in mind. It's like in most cases that won't happen, but if you, for example, decide to force push, there's a force flag, or if you decide to ignore the warnings and you made changes that are incompatible with the app that's running on users' devices, then yeah, that's the absolute worst crash or worst case that can happen is a crash and then a rollback. And like I really want to reiterate, we really don't want Shorebird to ruin your user experience, which is why there's all these things in place, like the rollback if there's a crash, or like the warnings if you've made asset changes or native code changes. And like really we wanted Shorebird to be just like a nice thing that you add on top of your app, and it degrades back down to like your user experience that you're used to already. So yeah, that's the big thing. And if you want to remove Shorebird from your app for whatever reason, it's as simple as, instead of creating a release with Shorebird release, just go back to using Flutter build, and then Shorebird is no longer in your app. So you don't have to make massive changes to your code base to add or remove Shorebird. It's just a build time step that you run, which is super, super nice. And that was one of our goals when building Shorebird. So, but I think we covered most of the other questions. Those are, I think, just some of the other common things that folks ask. Oh, and I guess the last thing that I'm seeing as I'm scrolling through the FAQs is that app ID that's in the shorebird.yaml. Is that a secret? Is that okay to commit in GitHub or whatever? And it's not a secret, and it should be okay to commit in source control. It's just a UUID that tells Shorebird about your app and uniquely identifies your app, but it's not, you shouldn't have to treat that as a secret or anything. So don't worry about putting that in GitHub. But yeah, I think we covered most of the questions. AppStore policies is definitely the most popular one. So
yes, of course. And one thing to clarify, so whenever you do like a plugin change, like you add a plugin, let's say, to your Flutter project, or you change the assets, you get every time a warning?
Yes.
Or
you get a warning, and you have to explicitly say, yes, I want to continue.
I want to crash my...
So yeah, and it won't always crash your apps. Like, for example, if you make an asset change, the worst thing that will happen with the asset changes, usually, like, for example, if you make an icon change, like you add a new icon to your app, like Flutter just won't render the icon properly. Like you'll see a little question mark or a little square, and the icon just won't get rendered, but your app won't crash in that case. For example, the crashes should be like for very severe things, like you're calling some plugin that doesn't exist, or I don't know, you've made some change to the API contract of your app, and the backend is returning some incompatible thing, and you're deserializing something wrong and not handling exceptions. Like it's like typical things that would cause crashes in your app. And so it's really like pretty rare for that to happen, and you have to bypass the safety checks that Shorebird has in most cases. So yeah, I think it's pretty rare. And if you, for example, iOS early on, there were a lot of known crashers with iOS without you doing any of that. Again, that's part of the reason why iOS is still in alpha. And I think we've resolved most of the crashes on iOS. But again, like iOS is still in alpha. I do not recommend using it in production. But even iOS is a lot more stable now than it was like a month ago or even like a couple of weeks ago. So we're working really hard and quickly to bring iOS up to standards with Android for code push. But yeah, Shorebird detects all of those things, and the CLI will warn you. The main thing you have to keep in mind or like think about is if you're using it in CI, because in CI you probably are going to run it with like either a force flag or some sort of like configuration to override some of those checks. So if you're pushing to CI, there's no user input or like way for you to say yes or no, right? Like once you've pushed to CI, your workflow will run. And so just be really careful if you're using Shorebird and CI, and make sure that you can run like a dry run in your CI, which is what I would recommend first. Is you can run like Shorebird patch -- dry run, and that will do all of the checks without actually creating the patch. And then if the dry run succeeds, then it's usually safe to do the push in CI. So there's a lot of safety things in place for preventing that from happening. But again, even in the worst possible scenario, it's a single crash and then a rollback. So it's not the end of the world, even if that happens, but that's should not happen in most cases unless you override the warning.
Yeah, that's a really good point about the CI/CD. Okay, and
Yeah.
yeah, that's might be a question. I don't know if this is a good question or not. If Shorebird is forever for
Yeah,
whatever reason down,
yeah.
will it impact that my app is not working anymore?
Yeah. Yeah. The only thing that will happen is maybe users will launch your app, and then the app will check to see if there's an update, and then they will not get any response back. But again, that's all running on a separate thread in the background, so it does not affect your app. And if Shorebird is down and I don't know, you're not able to push patches, like your app will just work the same way. Your users just won't receive patches. Or the same thing will happen if you're on the free tier, for example, and you exceed the 5,000 patch installs per month. Your app will continue to work just fine. You just won't have your users continue receiving patches. So it won't, like, your app won't stop working for any reason. Again, like, we really want Shorebird to be just an improvement on your app and never degrade your app experience. So in the worst case, like, your app will just work the way it did before Shorebird, and then you can always create a new release and submit to the App Store just like you did before. So yeah.
Yes. Okay, and we can also look at this one question. Like, when do you suggest to use what was it? Yeah, when do you suggest to use Shorebird instead of Play Store and App Store directly to push? Is there like any specific use cases when you should go with Play Store, App Store, or when with Shorebird?
Yeah, I think actually I recommend probably the safest thing that you can do is, let's say like you find a critical bug and you want to use Shorebird to fix that bug. I would probably recommend that you just fix that bug with Shorebird, but you also at the same time submit a new release to the App Store, because then you can kick off the App Store review process in parallel while you fix the bug immediately for people. And I think that there's no reason why you can't submit to the App Store like on the same frequency as you did before, but now you don't have to wait to get the updates into people's hands. I think the other thing that people don't oftentimes realize is, like, just because you've submitted to the App Store and just because it was approved by the App Store doesn't mean that your users are running that version of your app. Like, a lot of times people have auto updates disabled on their phones and they're running a really, really old version of your app on their phone. And you have this like massive spread of users running like all kinds of versions of your app. And so Shorebird can help alleviate some of that if you are, for example, using Shorebird to kind of like make sure that people are always updating and staying on the latest version, or at least getting the fixes that are available on the newest versions without having to require like a force upgrade. That's one way. But yeah, I think there's no harm in still submitting to the, like, I don't think you need to stop submitting to the App Store and Play Store because you're using Shorebird. It's more, you can just think of it as a way to get the update on people's devices right away for critical things that need to be improved right away, that you don't want to be waiting multiple days for. And yeah, you can always, like I mentioned, submit in parallel so that the App Store will ideally review and approve those changes. And then people who install the app from the App Store, they'll install the latest version. They won't have to install the patch over the air. They'll already be running the patched version of the app. And I think that's the best case scenario. So like I mentioned on iOS, like, even once iOS is stable, everything is going to run in an interpreter that you've patched. So you want to be running as little code as possible in an interpreter. And so for that reason, I think it's good to like be in the mindset of, I always want to be submitting my updates to the App Store for review, because I want that code to be running on the CPU as much as possible on people's devices. And so you can think of Shorebird as just a way to kind of like eliminate that gap between when you make a change and when users get that change. But the App Store, I think, is still a really important part of the process. And I would recommend pretty much just whenever you create a patch, fix that in the next release and submit the release to the App Store on the regular schedule that you normally would as well. And then you kind of get the best of both worlds, because you get the updates right away without the waiting of the App Store, but then people who are downloading it fresh from the App Store also have all of the same fixes, and they don't need to install patches. Because there is the cost, right, of like downloading a patch over the air and like it's running in an interpreter and all that stuff. So yeah, that would be my recommendation, is patch and then submit to the App Store in addition, and then you kind of have the best of both worlds.
Yes. And is there any possibility in the future, like to make it better, like that you don't need to restart twice the app? And are you working
I think
on it,
that
or like
we're not actively working on that at the moment. I think we talked about ways to do that. I think it was a couple of weeks ago, and I think, again, I keep mentioning we're a small team, and right now everyone is focusing on getting iOS out the door as like a stable release. So that's the number one priority. But I think that we can probably get it down to just one relaunch, because we can probably make it so that whenever you push a patch, Shorebird will detect that and download the patch in the background for you automatically without doing that on the subsequent launch. So we can probably get it down to one restart. But there's trade-offs with that, right? Like there's trade-offs to downloading stuff in the background. Like you might want to check if the user is on Wi-Fi before doing that. You might want to like make that configurable by the developer or by the end user. And also it might depend on how big the patch is, right? Like maybe for small patches it's okay, but if you have a really big patch, you want to treat that differently. So there's all kinds of considerations. But I think that, yeah, we can definitely probably in the near future get it down to a single release. It just depends on, like, there's all these variables that have to be considered, and how to customize that, I think, becomes a consideration, since right now you just have a on or off switch basically. And if we do kind of adjust that, you'll probably want to have more like low level control over like Wi-Fi only, or patches that are smaller than this size only automatically install them, and that type of thing, and leave everything else up to the user maybe. But yeah, there's a issue, I believe, open for this. So let me see if I can find it. Yeah, maybe this is not the right one. If I find it, I'll share it. Otherwise, yeah, if this is something that's super important to you and you want the default behavior to not require 2 relaunches of the app, just open an issue, and we can talk more about that and discuss it again internally as a team, and then figure out what the best way forward is. But again, that probably won't be until after iOS is out the door. So iOS is the number one thing that we need to get done, and then everything else will come after that.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, I see here one more question is coming inside, or like multiple, but I think might be interesting, because they always talk here about crash. What if my app crash, or can I support Crashlytics with Shorebird? I think
Crashlytics will work. Yeah, Crashlytics will work the same exact way. If you already have Crashlytics in your app, you'll still get crash reports. Also, I see a question about obfuscating. Shorebird does not care. Yeah, like you can obfuscate your app and Shorebird will work. We do not care. And also, Shorebird never actually sees the source code for your app. So that's another important one. Sometimes people ask, like, do you ever see my code? Like, am I uploading my code to Shorebird servers? And the answer is no. The only thing you upload to Shorebird servers is the artifact or the binary that you submit to the Play Store or the App Store. So yeah, you can obfuscate it. You can have Crashlytics for crash reporting, and Shorebird does not care about any of that. So
that's great. Okay, then I think we are mainly done with this live stream. And one last question before you go, which is off topic. What kind of state management do you prefer? I mean, you are the creator of the blog package, right? But
Yeah.
What
Yeah.
state management do you prefer? Do you also sometimes use other state managements besides block?
Yeah, I mean, when I was at VGV, pretty much we exclusively used block, but I remember someone asked this question on Twitter or X. Back in the day, they said, like, Felix, if you could not use block, what state management would you use? And I think in that case, I like a value notifier with like a basic provider. I actually think I like provider a lot, even though maybe people have moved to Riverpod. I still like the scoping and like the widget tree based approach of providing dependencies and accessing them via context, because like at least my brain always thinks of your dependency graph as the widget tree, because there you already have like this nice data structure in Flutter, which is the widget tree. And so it just makes sense to me to scope things as you need them uh, in the part of the widget tree that's using them. And so, yeah, I'd probably kind of go with a simple solution that uses like value notifier, change notifier, provider, and you can probably get pretty far with just a solution like that. And you might not even need any external packages, actually. Like, you can probably build your own inherited widget and just use the built-in solutions. But yeah, I've mainly used block at VGV, and I still think block is great for all different sizes, obviously. So yeah, like you can use qubit for really simple state, and if you need state that's more complex, that you need to track how you got into that state, then you can use block, and you have events and event sourcing and that type of thing. But yeah, I think that honestly at this point, like, most of the popular state management libraries are all great, and you can do the same thing with all of them. And so I'd say that if you're comfortable with it, you can test it, and your team is happy with it, then just use whatever whatever solution you have. I don't think that there's really like a right or wrong answer. I think it's
Yes.
just why it's so controversial is because everyone has their own preferences, and maybe depending on the background that you're coming from and the tools that you've used in the past, something just feels more natural to you than something else. And so, yeah, I think the biggest things I look for is testability, readability, and I like that block forces you to separate your logic from your views, because I think that's something that's always helped make a large scale app more manageable and easier to maintain. But yeah, I think they're all really, really great, and just use whatever works best for you.
Yes. Okay. All right. Then I think we are like finishing with the live stream. Thank you very much for attending. It was really informative. It's like really great
Yeah,
that
thanks for
you're
having
here and that you explained everything
Yeah, yeah.
about how it works and all the questions that the people ask. That's really great. And as a last thing, I want just to point out, if you have never used Mason before, I really love it. So if you want to use like a
Yeah, thanks for sharing.
generator for generating
That's
Flutter
awesome to
code,
hear.
yeah, that's also like
Yeah,
what
yeah. I'm
great.
actually working on some improvements to Brick Hub, where you can upload your Mason
Yes.
templates. So we'll probably announce some updates in the near future. But yeah, thanks for sharing. It's really awesome to hear that. I love when people share. Yeah,
Yes.
it's brickhub.dev.
Brickhub.dev,
Oh,
where
the
you can
doc.
upload your
Yeah.
bricks.
So that's super awesome. Yeah, thanks for sharing.
Yes. Okay. All right. Then, yeah, thank you very much for attending this live stream. And yeah, then we can just end it right now. And thank you again a lot for joining.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. It was great. Had a lot of fun.
Yeah, me too. Me too.